Rain in Statesboro was never just rain. It always brought something else with it. Crime, secrets, trouble. Detective Isaiah Fremont knew this better than most, having worked for the city police for over 20 years. He stood at the window of his office, watching the gray drops hit the glass, when the phone rang. "Fremont," he said curtly into the receiver, continuing to stare at the dreary cityscape. "Detective, we have a missing person report." Delilah Price, 52 years old. The dispatcher's voice sounded matter-of-fact, as if he were reporting a lost wallet rather than the disappearance of the city attorney's wife. Fremont tensed involuntarily. The Prices. The name alone evoked a mixture of irritation and bitterness in him. Leonard Price had once sent his younger brother to prison on the basis of fabricated evidence, purely for political reasons. His family connection to the criminal had cost Fremont a promotion. Now Price's wife was missing. The irony of fate. "Who reported it?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Her husband, the city prosecutor. He says she didn't come home last night." "I'll be right there." 30 minutes later, Fremont was sitting in the Price family's luxurious mansion on Oak Street. Leonard Price looked impeccable even at a moment like this, his shirt ironed, his tie perfectly knotted, not a single emotion on his face. He spoke measuredly and calmly, as if reading testimony in a courtroom. "Delilah was supposed to be back by 8 o'clock. We had dinner plans with the mayor, but she didn't show up. That's not like her." "Have you tried to contact her?" "Of course. Her phone is off." "When was the last time you saw her?" "Yesterday morning, before work." Price adjusted his cufflinks slightly. "She said she had important meetings with clients. Delilah runs a law firm, as you know." Something about that answer didn't add up. Fremont had long since learned to recognize lies, especially in the words of people like Price. His calmness seemed strange to him. If his wife hadn't come home, he would have turned the whole town upside down. "Mr. Price, has your wife been having any problems lately? Threats? Unusual phone calls?" "No, nothing like that." Leonard glanced at his watch, as if he had more important things to do than worry about his wife's disappearance. "Detective, I appreciate your efficiency, but perhaps we're making a mountain out of a molehill. Delilah is a grown woman. She probably just decided to take a break." "A break?" Fremont raised an eyebrow. "In our relationship," the prosecutor said it with such coldness that the detective felt uncomfortable. "Our marriage hasn't been ideal lately." "Has she left before?" "No. But there's a first time for everything, isn't there?" Price stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "I'll give you access to her things if you need it. Just let's keep it quiet." "You understand my reputation?" "Of course," Fremont replied dryly. "Reputation is everything." After leaving the prosecutor's house, the detective did not go to the station. Something about this case had caught his attention, and it wasn't just the old scores with Leonard. The husband's indifference seemed unnatural. Fremont decided to start with Delilah's office. The law firm of Price and Partners occupied the entire top floor of a business center in downtown. The secretary, a young woman with anxious eyes, immediately showed him into the office. "Mrs. Price hasn't shown up today," she said, fiddling with the bracelet on her wrist. "And she left early yesterday, around 3. She said she had personal business to attend to." "Did she often leave early?" "In recent months, yes. Mrs. Price always used to stay late." Fremont looked around the office. Perfectly tidy, minimalist design. Nothing personal except for a single photograph on the desk. Delilah with a woman about her age, both smiling. "Who's that with her?" "Amara Baxter. They've been friends for years. Amara owns the Blue Note Jazz Club downtown." Fremont nodded and continued his inspection. The computer was password protected, but the secretary, clearly concerned about the situation, gave him access. He scanned Delilah's emails and found nothing suspicious. Business letters, meetings, court cases. However, he found something interesting in her phone records. One number had been called dozens of times in recent months, sometimes for several hours at a time. Fremont wrote down the number and was about to leave when the phone on his belt rang. "Fremont, detective, you'd better come to Industrial Drive." The officer's voice sounded tense. "Looks like a shootout, and a big one. 137 shell casings at the scene, sir. Never seen anything like it. Bodies? That's the strange thing. Not a single one." The old warehouse district on the outskirts of Statesboro had always been a problem area. Abandoned buildings, drug dealers, gangs. When Fremont arrived, the place was already swarming with police and experts. The concrete floor was littered with shell casings, the walls riddled with bullet holes. The neighbors called the police around midnight after hearing gunshots, explained Officer Davis, a young patrolman who was the first to arrive on the scene. But by the time we got here, there was no one here. Blood? There are traces, but not much. If anyone was wounded, they were taken away from here. Fremont slowly walked around the room. 137 shots. This wasn't just a shootout, it was a full-scale war. What could have caused such carnage? And more importantly, who was involved? This area is controlled by the kings of the street gang, Davis said, as if reading his mind. Maybe a turf war? Possibly, Fremont said, bending down to examine one of the shell casings. Send everything to ballistics, and check the local hospitals. If someone was wounded, they might have sought help. Back in the car, the detective decided to check the number from Delilah's phone. The system quickly returned the information. The phone belonged to Tyrone Baxter, 18 years old. Address: Maple Avenue, 23. The surname seemed familiar to Fremont, and after a moment he remembered. Amara Baxter, Delilah's friend from the photo. Coincidence? Unlikely. When he pulled up to the address, a small but well-kept house with a porch, it was already around 5 in the evening. The door was opened by a tall, elegant woman with short dreadlocks dyed silver. Her face looked haggard, her eyes red. "Detective Fremont, Statesboro Police," he showed his badge. "Are you Amara Baxter?" "Yes." She looked alarmed. "Has something happened?" "I'm investigating the disappearance of Delilah Price. You know her, right?" Amara's face changed, as if she had been struck. "Delilah is missing? My God, please come in." Inside, the house was cozy and creative. Musical instruments, paintings on the walls, bookshelves. Amara led him into the living room and sat down, clasping her hands. "When did this happen?" "She didn't come home last night. Have you seen her recently?" "We saw each other the day before yesterday, had coffee downtown. She seemed tense, but didn't mention any problems." Amara shook her head. "I can't believe it. Delilah is so organized, so predictable. What did Leonard say?" "Not much. He mentioned that they were having marital problems." "That's putting it mildly," Amara smiled bitterly. "They've been living like neighbors for years. Leonard is too absorbed in his career, and Delilah..." She trailed off. "Anyway, it's none of my business." "I need to talk to your son, Tyrone," Fremont said, watching the woman's reaction closely. "Is he home?" Amara tensed but quickly regained her composure. "He's at rehearsal. He should be back soon. Why do you want to talk to him?" "Routine check," Fremont replied evasively. "Delilah has been calling his number frequently." "Oh, that," Amara waved her hand with feigned ease. "Tyrone works part-time at my club. Delilah helps him with legal issues for his music career. Contracts, copyrights, you know how it is." Fremont nodded, though he didn't believe a word. Something wasn't right here. "Did Delilah have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted to hurt her?" "She's a lawyer, a detective. She has enemies all over town." Amara stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "I'll call you if I remember anything, and I'll tell Tyrone to get in touch with you." As he was leaving, Fremont turned around. "One more question. Do you know anything about the shooting on Industrial Drive last night?" For a split second, fear flashed in Amara's eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. "No, nothing. Why?" "Just asking. Goodbye, Mrs. Baxter." Back at the station, Fremont immersed himself in his work. He requested surveillance footage from the warehouse, checked Delilah's banking history, and reviewed the cases she had been working on in recent months. Nothing suspicious. But his intuition told him that her disappearance was connected to the shooting. It was too much of a coincidence. As he was about to go home, he received a message from the patrol officers. A car registered to Delilah Price had been found in the parking lot of an abandoned motel half a mile from the warehouse. Fremont left immediately. The silver Lexus was parked in the far corner of the lot, half hidden by bushes. There were no signs of forced entry, and the keys were missing. Fremont shone his flashlight into the interior and froze. There were clear splatters of blood on the driver's seat. A lot of blood. "Cordon off the area," he ordered the patrol officers. "And call the crime scene investigators. This is no longer a missing person case. I'm afraid we're dealing with a murder." The rain intensified, drumming on the roof of the car. The drops washed the blood from the windshield, carrying away the last traces of Delilah Price. Fremont stood under an umbrella, looking at this scene, and felt that this case would be special to him. Not because of old scores with the prosecutor, but because of something bigger. A strange feeling that he had only touched the surface of something dark and complex. Isaiah Fremont's morning began with the smell of formaldehyde and the cold light of laboratory lamps. The medical examiner, Dr. Kamani, a thin man with a perpetually mocking expression, met him at the entrance to the morgue. "Good morning, Detective. Here to get the news about the blood from Price's car. Any results?" Fremont didn't like to beat around the bush. "It's definitely her blood. The type matches her medical records," Kamani said, handing him a folder with the report. "The amount is significant, but not fatal. I'd say it was a serious injury, but not fatal, at least not immediately." Fremont nodded as he studied the data. "Anything else in the car?" "The fingerprints belong mainly to her and her husband. There are a few unidentified ones, but they're pretty smudged. We're trying to process them." The doctor paused. "And one more thing. We found a shell casing in the back seat that's identical to the ones at the warehouse. Ballistics confirms it's definitely from the same weapon. So the connection between Delilah's disappearance and the shootout has been confirmed." Fremont thanked the expert and went to his office, where a stack of printouts was waiting for him. Call records, bank statements, surveillance camera reports. Immersing himself in Delilah Price's life story, he tried to understand what could have led a successful woman to a bloody shootout in an abandoned warehouse district. On the surface, everything was perfect. A graduate of a prestigious law school, 27 years of marriage to a prosecutor, her own thriving firm, no debts, no obvious problems. But there were cracks in this flawless facade. Over the past 6 months, Delilah had withdrawn nearly $20,000 in cash from her accounts. Small amounts, as if she didn't want to attract attention. And those endless calls to Tyrone Baxter. Fremont decided it was time to talk to the young musician, but first, he wanted to find out more about him. Police search engines yielded scant information. 18 years old, no arrests, studying at Statesboro Music College, plays the saxophone and piano. His social media profile was minimalist. A few photos from performances, no personal posts. By noon, the detective was pulling up to the music college, an old red brick building. The dean, a plump woman with kind eyes, readily agreed to help. "Tyrone is one of our best students," she said, leading Fremont down the hallway. "A real talent. He received a full scholarship and has already attracted the attention of several labels. What kind of person is he?" "Quiet. Focused," she thought. "A little withdrawn. Many creative people are like that, but there were no problems with him." They stopped at the door of the rehearsal room, from which came the melodious sounds of a saxophone, a slow, sad jazz composition. "He's in here." The dean knocked and opened the door. Tyrone sat on a chair by the window, completely immersed in the music. Tall, thin, with a neatly trimmed beard, he looked older than his 18 years. Hearing the knock, he looked up from his instrument, and Fremont noticed a momentary flicker of alarm in his eyes, quickly hidden behind a polite smile. "Tyrone, this is Detective Fremont. He'd like to talk to you." "Sure." The guy's voice was deep, like his music. "Is something wrong?" Fremont waited for the dean to leave and sat down across from the musician. "I'm investigating the disappearance of Delilah Price." "Do you know her?" Tyrone looked away, his fingers nervously running over the keys of his saxophone. "Yes, she advised me on legal matters, helped with contracts." "Did you communicate often?" "According to my records, there were over 200 calls in the last 3 months." The guy swallowed. "There were a lot of legal details that needed to be discussed." "At 3 in the morning?" Fremont raised an eyebrow. "I've seen the records. Many of the calls were very late and lasted for hours." Tyrone remained silent, his head bowed. "Listen." The detective softened his tone. I'm not interested in your personal life. I'm only interested in Delilah's disappearance. We found her car and there's blood in it. This is serious. The young musician flinched, his face contorted with pain. Blood? Is she dead? We don't know, but she needs help if she's still alive. Were you with her that night? No, he replied too quickly. I mean, I didn't see her at all that day. Fremont didn't believe him. It was obvious. Tyrone, you understand that withholding information in a case like this is a crime? The young man sighed heavily, put his saxophone in its case, and closed it, as if putting an end to the matter. We were close, he finally said quietly. Not just lawyer and client. We had a relationship. A romantic relationship? Yes, he looked up, his eyes showing a mixture of defiance and fear. I know how it looks. She's much older, married, but there was something real between us, not just a fling. Fremont kept a neutral expression on his face. He had seen it all in his lifetime, and had long since ceased to be surprised by human passions and weaknesses. How long ago did it start? About 6 months ago, Tyrone said more openly now, as if the confession had made him feel better. I was performing at my mother's club, and she was there with her friends. We talked after the show, exchanged numbers. It started with a discussion about music and the law, and then... Did your mother know? No, he exclaimed with genuine horror. No one knew. We were very careful. Fremont made a note in his notebook and continued. Tell me about the evening she disappeared. Did you talk to her? Tyrone visibly tensed. Yes, we spoke on the phone that afternoon. She was worried. About what? I was having problems, he said, lowering his head, with the kings of the street gang. I started performing at the Midnight Club across the street from them, and they didn't like it. The threat started. And Delilah knew about this? I told her. Tyrone looked guilty. She was furious. She said she'd take care of it. I asked her not to get involved, but Delilah has always been very determined. The picture was starting to become clearer. A woman protecting her young lover from gangsters. What exactly was she planning to do? I don't know, I swear. His voice sounded desperate. She said she had connections, that she could fix everything. I thought she meant some kind of legal leverage. The police, I don't know. The last thing she said was, I'll take care of this problem tonight. And then... He paused, catching his breath. I tried to call her all evening, but her phone was off. Fremont watched the young man closely. He seemed genuinely concerned, but something told the detective that he was still not telling the whole truth. Do you have any idea where she might have gone? Who she might have met? No, I really don't know. At that moment, the door opened and Amara Baxter appeared in the doorway. She looked more composed today than she had yesterday, but there was still a look of concern in her eyes. Tyrone? I was told you were here with the police, she said, turning her gaze to the detective. What's going on? Just a few questions about Delilah Price, Fremont replied calmly, noting how tense Tyrone became when his mother appeared. Your son is assisting with the investigation. I'm sure he's doing everything he can, Amara said, placing a hand on her son's shoulder, clearly signaling her protective stance. Any new leads? The investigation is ongoing, Fremont replied evasively. Mrs. Baxter, can I have a word with you? They stepped into the hallway, and the detective noticed Amara give her son a warning look before closing the door. I'd like to take a look at your club, Fremont said without preamble. The Blue Note, right? Yes, but why? She looked puzzled. Delilah wasn't there that evening. How do you know which evening she disappeared? I didn't mention the date. Amara was thrown off balance for just a second. Well, I assumed you meant the night before last, when I last saw her, she smiled slightly. Detective, my club is open to the public. Come anytime. How long have you known Delilah? Almost 20 years. Our children went to the same kindergarten. Her face softened. She helped me with the paperwork when I opened the club. We've been through a lot together. How would you describe her marriage? Complicated, Amara shrugged. Leonard was always more married to his career, and Delilah, she deserved better. Better than your son? Fremont asked bluntly, watching her reaction. Amara's face froze for a moment, then she laughed. but it sounded fake. What are you talking about? Delilah was a mentor to Tyrone, helping him with his career. That's all. Mrs. Baxter, your son just admitted to me that they've been in a romantic relationship for the past 6 months. It was a bluff. Tyrone hadn't said his mother didn't know, but Fremont wanted to see her real reaction, and it was worth it. Amara's face went through a whole range of emotions: shock, denial, anger, and finally something like hidden satisfaction. That's impossible, she said firmly, but her eyes told a different story. Tyrone would have told me. We're very close. Perhaps he was afraid of your reaction, Fremont suggested. After all, Delilah was your best friend, and almost 3 times his age. I don't believe that, Amara snapped, but her voice faltered. Delilah wouldn't have. This is some kind of mistake. I'm going to look into their relationship in more detail, Fremont said. In the meantime, if you remember anything useful about Delilah's last days, let me know. Of course, Detective. Her voice grew colder. I want her found just as much as you do. Back at the station, Fremont immersed himself in the case files. Something didn't add up. If Delilah went to deal with the gang because of the threats to Tyrone, why didn't she involve her husband, the prosecutor, or the police? And how did a woman in her position end up in a shootout? That evening, he decided to visit the Blue Note Club. The place turned out to be stylish and atmospheric. Dim lighting, high-quality sound, a predominantly adult crowd. A quartet was performing on stage, but Tyrone was not among the musicians. Amara, noticing the detective, nodded cheerfully from behind the bar, as if their morning conversation had never happened. She approached him when he settled down at a corner table. Detective Fremont, it's nice to see you outside of work. She smiled, but her eyes didn't smile. What would you like to drink? A soda, please. I'm on duty. She returned with his drink and sat down across from him. Any new leads? We're working on it. Fremont glanced around the room. Nice club. How long have you been in this business? 15 years. I started with a small bar, then expanded. She was clearly proud of her achievement. It wasn't easy, especially for a single mother. What about Tyrone's father? He left when my son was 3. Her face hardened. We've been doing it together ever since. Fremont nodded, taking a sip of soda. Do you know anything about the Midnight Club? Amara tensed. Competitors. They opened a couple of years ago. They attract a younger crowd, she shrugged. There's enough room in the city for everyone. I hear they have problems with the kings of the street. Everyone in that neighborhood has problems with the kings. She glanced quickly at the stage. Why do you ask? Just gathering information. Fremont decided to change the subject. Does Tyrone perform here often? Every Friday. He's our star, she said with undisguised pride in her voice. Come listen. They talked a little more about jazz and the music scene in Statesboro before Amaru was distracted by club business. Fremont finished his drink and was about to leave when he noticed a familiar figure in the corner of the room. Leonard Price was talking to a man, gesturing animatedly. It was strange to see a man whose wife had gone missing just 2 days ago in a jazz club, acting as if nothing had happened. Fremont approached their table, and Price looked up, clearly unhappy about the intrusion. Detective, he nodded dryly. Any news? Nothing I can share right now, Fremont said, looking at the prosecutor's companion. Did I interrupt? We were just finishing up, the man said, standing up and shaking Price's hand. See you tomorrow, Leonard. When they were alone, the prosecutor sighed. What do you want, Detective? I'm trying to take my mind off things. Sitting at home alone is becoming unbearable. I understand. Fremont sat down in the vacant chair. I'm just surprised you chose this particular club. Why? The music is good here. And the owner is your wife's best friend. Amara has always been more of a friend to Delilah than to me. Price swirled his whiskey glass. But she runs the best jazz club in town. And besides, he paused. I was hoping to hear something new about Delilah. Amara might know something I didn't. Did you? No, he looked away. She seems as concerned as I am. Fremont decided to test the prosecutor's reaction to his new information. Mr. Price, did you know that your wife was in a romantic relationship with Amara's son? Leonard's face remained unchanged, Only a shadow flashed in his eyes. "I suspected she had someone," he said quietly, "but you didn't know who it was. And that didn't bother you?" "Detective, Delilah and I have been living separate lives for a long time." He took a sip of whiskey. "The only thing I asked was for discretion. My reputation—" "Of course, your reputation." Fremont didn't hide his sarcasm. "Are you aware that your wife may have been involved in a conflict with the kings of the street gang?" This was clearly news to the prosecutor. He sat up straight, his face tense. "What? That's absurd. Delilah would never—" "She had her reasons," Fremont interrupted him. "Protecting the interests of a loved one." Leonard paused, considering the information. "If that's true, this is more serious than I thought," he finally said. "The Kings aren't people to mess with. I've worked on cases against them several times. They're violent and vengeful." "Maybe that's why she didn't come to you for help." "Maybe," Price sighed. "What now, Detective?" "Now we keep looking," Fremont said, standing up. "Good night, Mr. District Attorney." The next day, Fremont decided to inspect the apartment Delilah rented for her meetings with Tyrone. He found the address in her bank statements, monthly payments to a real estate agency. The building manager gave him the key after he presented his warrant. The apartment was small but cozy. There was minimal furniture, a few paintings on the walls, and a piano in the corner. Fremont methodically examined every corner, looking for clues. In the closet were several sets of clothes, and in the bathroom were 2 sets of toiletries. On the bedside table was a book of poetry with a bookmark. Then something strange caught his attention. One of the floorboards next to the bed looked slightly raised. He knelt down and carefully pried it up. Under the floor was a small hiding place, and in it was a box. Inside were letters, dozens of handwritten letters. Fremont took one out and unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant and confident. "My dear Tyrone, every time I see you on stage, I feel my heart skip a beat. Your music says what words cannot express. You have breathed life into my existence, which for so long has been only a shadow of the real." Fremont put the letter down, feeling like he had invaded something deeply personal. He went through the rest of the envelopes, paying attention to the dates. The last letter was dated the day Delilah disappeared. With his heart pounding, he opened it. "Tyrone, today it all ends. I won't let them threaten you or your future. I have a meeting with Darius at 8 o'clock tonight at the old warehouse. Don't worry, I'll be careful. By midnight, everything will be settled and we can move on as planned. Maybe we'll even leave this city. Yours forever, D. Darius." The name sounded familiar to Fremont. He took out his phone and quickly ran it through the database. Darius Hall, known as King D, leader of the Kings of the Streets gang. Delilah's disappearance was becoming clearer, and the picture was disturbing. He photographed the last letter and carefully put everything back in the box. It wasn't just evidence, it was a love story that ended in tragedy, and Fremont felt that not all the secrets of this story had been revealed yet. The rain had finally stopped, but the streets of Statesboro remained wet, reflecting the city lights in dark puddles. Isaiah Fremont sat in his office, surrounded by sticky notes, photographs, and documents. On the board in front of him was a chronology of the last days of Delilah Price's life. The letter found in the hiding place had become a key element in the investigation. Darius Hall was the person she was going to meet. Fremont took out his phone and dialed the number of his informant, a man who had worked for many years on the borderline between the law and the criminal world. "Jay, I need to meet with Darius Hall." "Are you crazy?" The voice on the other end sounded alarmed. "King D doesn't meet with cops, especially now when they're on edge. Because of the shootout? The whole city is talking about it. 137 shots, man. That's no joke." Fremont thought for a moment. If he acted officially, he would never get to Darius. He needed a different approach. "Tell him I want to talk about Delilah Price. Just talk. It's in his best interest." 2 hours later, the detective was sitting in the back room of an underground poker club on the outskirts of town. Darius Hall was younger than he had expected, no more than 35, with intelligent eyes and a scar across his left eyebrow. He entered accompanied by 2 bodyguards, but with a gesture sent them to the door. "5 minutes, detective," he said, sitting down opposite him. "What's so important about Price?" "She disappeared 3 days ago. The same evening there was a shootout at the warehouse." Darius kept a straight face. "So?" "I have information that she was going to meet with you." The gang leader smirked. "Why would the prosecutor's wife want to meet with me?" "Because of Tyrone Baxter. She wanted to resolve his issues with your people." Something changed in Darius's eyes, a flash of understanding. "Ah, that musician." He leaned back in his chair. "Yes, there was some friction. The kid played at a club that refused to pay us for protection." "And Delilah came to you because of that?" "She made an appointment," Darius said slowly. "She called me personally. I don't know how she got my number. She said she wanted to discuss the situation with the musician, that she was willing to pay to have him left alone." "Did she come?" Darius paused for a moment as if deciding how much he could say. "She did, but she wasn't alone." He leaned forward. "Listen, detective, I'm a criminal, but I'm not an idiot. I don't need any trouble with the prosecutor's wife. I came to talk, maybe take the money and close the case." "What went wrong?" "Someone turned her against me. Said I was planning something with the kid." Darius shook his head. "She came armed with 2 of her people. She opened fire as soon as she saw us. And the shooting started. Total chaos." He spread his arms. "When it was over, she was gone. I thought she left with her people." "Who do you think could have turned her against you?" Darius shrugged. "No idea, but she was convinced I was going to kill the kid. She was yelling about it before she started shooting." Fremont stared intently at the gang leader, trying to determine whether he was lying or not. "Do you know what happened to her?" "I didn't touch her, if that's what you're asking." Darius stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. 3 of my guys were wounded in that shootout. 1 is still in the hospital. So if you find out who really set this trap, let me know. I have a score to settle with that person too." Back at the station, Fremont began to piece together the puzzle. If Darius was to be believed, someone had deliberately provoked the conflict between Delilah and the gang. Someone who knew about her relationship with Tyrone and the young musician's problems. He requested surveillance camera footage from around the warehouse district on the night of the shootout. Most of the cameras were either broken or turned off, but one, installed on a neighboring building by a private security company, was still working. The blurry video showed a black SUV pulling up to the warehouse 20 minutes before Delilah and Darius were supposed to meet. A female figure got out of the car, her face impossible to make out. Fremont sent the video for analysis to improve the quality and focused on the phone records. In the last hours before her disappearance, Delilah had called 3 people: Tyrone, Amara, and a number that belonged to Darius. The call to Amara was the last one, Fremont thought. What if? He pulled up Amara Baxter's phone history for the same period and found what he was looking for. Immediately after talking to Delilah, she called a number that, upon verification, turned out to be linked to one of the Street King's lieutenants. An hour after the shootout, the same person called her. The picture was starting to come together, but Fremont needed more solid evidence. He requested the GPS data from Amara's phone for the night of the shootout. The results confirmed his suspicions. She had been in the warehouse area at the critical time, and then near the place where Delilah's car was found. By evening, Fremont had received enhanced video from a surveillance camera. Now he could say with certainty that the woman who arrived at the warehouse before the meeting was Amara Baxter. Only one question remained. Where was Delilah's body? Fremont organized search parties to comb the wooded area around the place where the car was found. By the next morning, they had found a shallow grave with remains preliminarily identified as Delilah Price. Now he had all the evidence he needed. Amara Baxter had learned of her son's relationship with Delilah, was enraged by her friend's betrayal, and had set a deadly trap. She tricked Delilah into believing that Darius was a threat to Tyrone, provoked a shootout, and then, in the chaos, shot her and disposed of the body. 5 days after Delilah's disappearance, a memorial service was held at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church. The body had not yet been released to the family, but Leonard Price insisted on the ceremony. "The city needs a place to mourn," he said in a brief interview. In reality, as Fremont understood, the prosecutor needed to close the case as quickly as possible and get back to his career. The church was full, colleagues, friends, representatives of the city's elite. Fremont stood to the side, watching. Leonard Price looked appropriately mournful, periodically shaking hands with those offering their condolences. Tyrone sat in a far corner, pale and lost. And Amara Baxter moved between groups of people, accepting condolences as a close friend of the deceased, playing her role perfectly. When the service came to an end, Fremont intercepted Amara at the exit. "Mrs. Baxter, may I speak with you privately?" "Now?" She looked annoyed. "This isn't the best time, Detective." "I'm afraid there won't be another." He nodded toward the church garden. "Just 5 minutes." Reluctantly, she followed him. The day was clear and sunny, which seemed inappropriate for such a somber occasion. "We found Delilah's body," Fremont said without preamble. Amara flinched slightly, but quickly regained her composure. "My God, where?" "In the woods near where her car was. Interestingly, your phone shows that you were there on the night she disappeared." "That's a mistake," she said, clasping her hands nervously. "I was at the club all night." "We also have a recording of your conversation with a member of the Kings of the Street gang immediately after Delilah's call," Fremont continued, watching her reaction. "And surveillance camera footage of you arriving at the warehouse before the shootout began." Amara's face changed, her mask of grief slipping away to reveal cold fury. "You're bluffing." "No." Fremont took out his phone and showed her a frame from the enhanced video. "It's you, Amara. The game is over." She stared at the image for a long time, then looked at the church, where Tyrone was just coming out of the door. "You don't understand." Her voice became quiet, almost a whisper. "She used him. Delilah always got what she wanted. Always. And then she threw him away like a useless thing. You found out about their relationship." "By accident." Amara smiled bitterly. "I saw the messages on his phone. He left it unlocked. Can you imagine how I felt? My best friend and my son. He's 18 and she's 52. And you decided to kill her." "No," she exclaimed, then more quietly. "Not right away. At first I just wanted to talk to her to make her see reason, but she wouldn't listen. She said she loved him, that they were going to run away together. Take my son away, you understand? The only thing I have." Fremont listened silently. He had seen many killers in his career, but rarely had he encountered those who acted out of such deeply personal motives. "I knew about Tyrone's problems with the Kings," Amara continued, as if a dam had burst. "Delilah told me she was going to take care of it. I saw an opportunity." She paused. "I contacted them and told them she was dangerous, that she was planning to set them up. They were just supposed to scare her, maybe hurt her. I didn't think it would turn into a bloodbath." "But you were there." "Yes," she lowered her head. "I wanted to make sure everything was going according to plan. When the shooting started, everything got out of control. I saw Delilah trying to run away. I followed her." Amara looked up, her eyes showing no remorse, only exhaustion. "She recognized me. She asked, 'Why?' And I told her the truth. For my son, for the betrayal. And I shot her." Fremont took out his handcuffs. "Amara Baxter, you are under arrest for the murder of Delilah Price." As he snapped the handcuffs onto her wrists, Tyrone noticed what was happening and rushed over to them. "Mom, what's going on?" "Detective?" Amara looked at her son with a mixture of love and despair. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I wanted to protect you." "From what?" His voice trembled. "From her," Amara whispered. "From Delilah. She would have ruined your life." Tyrone's face contorted with shock and realization. You killed her?" He recoiled as if from a blow. "God, Mom, what have you done?" Fremont nodded to the patrol officers waiting nearby, and they took Amara away. The crowd around the church grew noisy, people pointing fingers and pulling out their phones. Tyrone remained standing in the middle of the garden, lost and devastated. Suddenly, Leonard Price approached him. The prosecutor put his hand on the young man's shoulder, and they both watched the police car with Amara drive away. Fremont watched the scene from a distance. Two men who loved the same woman in different ways, both betrayed by those they trusted, both victims of this tragedy. That evening, he saw them again at Delilah's symbolic grave in the city cemetery. They stood there for a long time, not talking, united by their shared loss and perhaps a sense of guilt. Closing the case in his office, Fremont thought about the strange paths that human passion takes. Delilah Price, disappointed in her long marriage, found solace in a relationship with a young musician, the son of her best friend. The price of this relationship turned out to be exorbitantly high, 137 shots and 3 ruined lives. He closed the case file, stamped it closed, and put it away in the filing cabinet. Rain began to patter on the windows of Statesboro again, washing away the sins of the city until the next tragedy, which would inevitably come, as it always did to this city with the rain.